Welcome to the Aim in Practice podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jess Reynolds, and in this podcast we talk about life as a practitioner, wellness in general, and what it means to practice. Today I'm talking with a really good friend of mine, Eric Stretch. Now, he's got a bit of a different story. He practiced as a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture for close to 8 years. And then he switched and went to something totally different. Not switched to a different part of healthcare and wellness, but fundamentally to a totally different industry. He stopped practicing medicine and got into IT. I think this is a really important conversation because it brings to light the fact that many people in this industry, they get into it with good intentions, but after a few months, maybe a few years, they realize it's actually not where their heart lies. But so many people stick to it. Whether it's because of the sunken cost fallacy, thinking they put too much time into it and they can't switch out, or maybe it's fear. But understanding that it is possible, and in some cases it's encouraged, to switch careers to something totally different, I think is pretty phenomenal. And Eric had a huge amount of courage in order to do so. So enjoy this conversation with my good friend Eric.
Yeah. So this water bottle, I wanted to tell you, it's my favorite water bottle because it's got like these grips on it.
Okay.
You know, so it like lines up the mouthpiece, and you can either use a straw or you can tip and drink. You know, like whatever mood you're in. If you're in a straw mood or like a tip mood, and it has a satisfying click to it.
Nice. I want to try the click. How do you open it?
Go like that.
Okay. Oh man, it's like super secure.
It's the whole thing.
I can't do it.
You got to work on those finger strength. Finger strength.
Yeah. I didn't do it.
Failure.
All right.
So yeah, I guess that's how we're starting this thing. Are we allowed to swear on this or what?
Oh, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, good. I'm not going to because I'm a gentleman.
Yeah, of course you are. Yeah.
But just in case one slips out, you never know. Kind of like the start of this podcast, you get blindsided by swears.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what do we do?
Well, I want you to tell us a little bit about what got you into medicine. Like, it's an open question, but yeah, just take whatever route you want to. You get 2 sentences or 20 minutes.
2 sentences. I don't know how long these are. I don't think I have all that much to talk about. To fill up, like, are these like 4 hours long?
I usually aim for 6. Is my typical.
I need more water.
Yeah.
But how I got into medicine? So my family. I have a family history. I have a lot of family members are in medicine, doctors and nurses. Now my mom's a nurse. Did I ever tell you that my mom's a nurse?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, okay. So it was always kind of suggested, and I don't know. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And you remember you went on your walkabout, and you were going to decide. You went on this walkabout, and you decided you're going to figure out what we were both going to do with our lives.
Yeah, I remember.
You came back, and you're like, we're going to go to medicine.
Yeah,
you don't know what kind of medicine. But certain sort of medicine in general. And you're like, and I think eventually you said you're going to study nutrition, being me. Yeah. And then you were going to do, so you just went straight into acupuncture.
Straight into acupuncture, yeah.
Yeah. So you had decided for both of us, as most of my adult life has been. So I just did what you told me, basically. But no, I've always had, and I still do, even though I'm not in it anymore. It's still a fascination.
Yeah.
And I think about it all the time. And, as much as I am constantly trying to figure out what my passion in life is, medicine is it's pretty up there in its generalized form. So, the big question was kind of what form of medicine do I go into? And that was, kind of the $1 million question. I was too old and I didn't have the educational background to go into like traditional, proper medicine.
Yeah. And we've talked about how much of a nightmare that would be often.
All the time. Yeah. And in hindsight, it really, even if all those cards did line up, I'm pretty happy I didn't go down that path. It was, before we even met each other, I decided that I was going in the fire department. And that was after I originally thought that I just wanted to be a paramedic. Yep. And so it kind of evolved from wanting to be a paramedic and then wanting to go into the fire department and then going into nutrition and then going into acupuncture. And so it was all medicine under the umbrella of medicine, but it all just sort of, I couldn't decide what format I wanted to actually use, what tools I wanted to use. But yeah, so it's always been, I don't think there was any kind of, magical moment that I decided that I liked medicine. It was just, it's always been interested in it. Yeah. And it's what I like to do, what I like to read about.
Yeah. Which is interesting because then when you actually got into it, right? Like once you graduated, you practiced for what? 8 years, 9 years?
Well, when did I? Yeah, 8 years, I think.
8 years, yeah.
I think that feels right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that feels good enough to me.
Yeah, we're close enough.
In the ballpark of 8 years. I don't know. It was such a weird. When I graduated, it was such a anticlimactic kind of finished with a bit of a whiffle.
Yeah.
That it was hard to say exactly when I finished school.
Right, that's right. Because after you technically should have finished, there was still like another year of having to.
Yeah, monkeying around and had to go to a different school to finish up the, Doctor of Chinese Medicine thing, and that was a whole to do. But yeah, I think it was about 8 years, give or take, that I practiced for. Most of them had evolved. When
you were practicing, like, what did you find the difference was? Because once you started practicing, did you still have the same like interest in health and wellness throughout that entire time, or
yeah. Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's such a broad topic, though, like, medicine, that I think you can have an interest in medicine without even overlapping with what you do professionally in medicine. There's so much to it that, even though I was practicing in acupuncture and I was, trained in that, I never really read about acupuncture, though.
Yeah,
it was never really. I wasn't going home and like, watching YouTube videos on Chinese medicine and stuff. That was never really my gig.
Yeah.
Despite what my education would tell you.
Yeah.
I would still read about medicine a lot. I don't think that ever waned. And it's still, even though I'm not even in that field at all anymore, I still, I like to read about it.
Really?
A lot. Yeah. And a lot of the podcasts that I listen to are kind of based around, it's a similar podcast to you and that kind of thing, general health stuff. And it's still fascinating to me. But no, when I was practicing, I still would read about it. It was still a big interest of mine, but just not really acupuncture.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that was, not only your education, but your gig. Like, you were the acupuncturist at your clinic, and it wasn't your passion.
The only one there. And no, it never really was. Never really was my passion. And I think that was, sort of the death knell to the whole thing was it never, I think to be successful in that industry, I think or any industry really, I think you need to really kind of dive in to that stuff. And it was never a great fit for me. I wanted it to be, but
I mean, you definitely put the effort in.
Certainly tried. Yeah. There's a lot of hours, but it never. It's one of those things you just can't force at the end of the day. And the sooner you can recognize that kind of stuff, I think the better. Yeah. But it's a hard realization to come to. It's that sunken cost fallacy where you put so much effort and money into something that it's easier not to think about it. That it was literally like, when I left the clinic after my day of work, I could barely tell you where I worked. My brain just shut off with that door closed, and I was off doing something else, thinking about all kinds of other stuff. I never thought about it, and so it was. Yeah, and that just is incompatible with having a successful practice.
Yeah, because I talk about this a lot with other people. It's like, when you're a practitioner, for some people, it's like practitioner is what you do when you're at work, but you're like all in. But then other people, being a practitioner, whatever it is, it's their entire identity, right? But it kind of sounds like it was neither one for you. It was like you when you were there, you weren't like, I'm an acupuncturist. I am this, and
and it always felt, I was always the odd man out at the clinic, because you're right. Like it's one of those, you kind of have to live the lifestyle gigs, and working at it. Like, I worked at a multidisciplinary clinic with all sorts of different practitioners of various disciplines, and no matter how different it was, everybody kind of lived the life though. Yeah. Whether you were a chiropractor or a naturopath or a dietitian or whatever, everybody was. You could tell that they were in that was their lifestyle. Was health in general. Not that health. I'm a big fan of health, obviously, but it was never. It's not my hobby. I think a lot of all these people, it's their profession and it's their hobby.
Yeah,
it's what they like to do. I remember my dad. He would tell me, so my dad's a cabinet maker, and he would tell me that, because he originally started out as a chemist, went to school for chemistry, and he graduated, and he started working for this battery company or some nonsense, and hated it. And he always knew in the back of his head, his grandpa was a cabinet maker, and I think his grandpa before that was a cabinet, and a long line of cabinet makers or woodworkers, I guess. And so he always kind of knew that's what he wanted to do. And so eventually, not dissimilar to my situation, just he did it a few years earlier than I did. He decided, it's got to happen. You got to ditch the whole thing that I'm not interested in and go for what I want to do. And so he went and became a cabinet maker. But I remember when I was a kid growing up, there's all those shows on Sunday night, like This Old House and like the New Yankee Workshop, those sorts of shows. Yeah. And my dad he obsessed with those shows. Yeah. And I mean, it seemed totally normal to me, but thinking back on my acupuncture life, it's the equivalent. It's the same thing with that. Like when he wasn't working, when he wasn't at his shop, he'd be thinking about woodworking. He'd be reading about it. He'd be watching these shows. He'd be thinking about projects that he's working on. He never really shut it off. And I never had that in acupuncture. It's never. You would really have to force me to to read any material in an extracurricular manner.
And I mean, that's kind of part of being a professional too, right? It's like people who invest in this career path, maybe professional is not the right way, but having this as your career, so many people who have chosen a career and dedicated huge portions of their life and their education to it, it is who they are. And, people say like, they don't like that question, what do you do for work? Because it's like, that's not important. It doesn't identify me as an acupuncturist. But on the other hand, there's actually kind of something to it, right? Yeah. Like when you get to a certain point in life, that question is quite telling. Like,
I mean, I think it's no coincidence that, when you go and meet a whole bunch of new people that you've never met before, that's usually the first question is, what do you do? And, when people say, what do you do? They're talking about your work. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of how people, identify. And I think it depends on what you go into. I think if you're working a 9 to 5 office job, then you probably don't have to, live that lifestyle the same way. But I think if you're choosing something like acupuncture or massage or any of the alternative medicines, really, you gotta kind of be all in on it. Yeah. I think, and it's hard to know. It's hard to know without going all into it. Like you kind of have to sort of jump in with both feet to even know that this is not something that you wanted to jump into with both feet. Like it's a hard, because it's not like I didn't know what acupuncture was before going into it. I mean, I lived with you at the time, and when I was studying nutrition, and you were doing acupuncture, and you'd tell me all the crazy shit that you were doing in acupuncture, needles and stuff, and all this wacky ass, nonsense about Chinese medicine. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. I don't know what any of this means, but sounds great. And I was kind of into it, and that's why I, kind of decided to go switch into that, and. But you don't figure that out. You don't figure out that it's kind of sucks. That's the way life is. But it's hard to know what you're not into until you actually do that thing. Yeah. Like when we did the fire department, we both did the fire department thing for a whole year, and we both decided that was 100%. That was what we were going to do. Was get in the fire department. Like that was the buffest you've ever been.
Yeah, it was great.
You're like a little muscle guy. And drinking all those whey protein powders and all that shit. Like, man, terrible.
Straight from the can.
Straight from the can, yeah. You remember, wasn't it the Mount Royal gym that we would go to? Yeah, it was. And we were doing like CrossFit, and we were those guys.
This was back in like CrossFit was just like barely even a blog.
Just starting. And we would have like the medicine balls out in the hallway and stuff, and be like banging medicine balls all over the place,
just
and crushing cans of protein, and just hating life.
Different life.
But we were all in on that.
Oh yeah, 100%.
At some point, you just kind of luckily we realized that with that before we even really got too far into it. But it took a while before we realized that wasn't what we wanted to do, and so it's hard. It's one of those life questions of how cautious do you be with your life? Are you forever worried that you're not going to fit with this thing, and so you don't try things, or do you just kind of go for it and see what happens? And I don't know. I guess that's kind of the way I did it with acupuncture. But
about how long into either the schooling or into practicing did you, like in retrospect, right? If you're to kind of turn back the clock and really find the first moment where something inside of you was like, this isn't my thing. Like, how far into your practice do you think you were before that first inkling started to show up?
Almost immediately, I would say, to be honest. I think I was more excited about the concept of being in medicine than I was excited about the particular kind of medicine that I was in. I was proud of being part of medicine.
Yeah.
But it didn't really have anything to do with acupuncture. And so I kind of knew that it was a poorly fitting shoe right from the get-go. Even going through school, I think it wasn't, I mean, like you, school came relatively easy to me, so I didn't really have to put in a tremendous amount of, there was still effort involved, but it never required all of my effort. I think if it did, then it might have, I might have clued into it a little sooner.
Yeah, right. Right.
But it never really, I don't remember when, maybe earlier on in school, it was a bit, I was more into it, but no, it never, I don't think it ever really felt totally right.
Yeah.
What I do now in like IT and that kind of stuff, that feels more right to me. Like it's just a different feeling. Like I have, the kind of job that I have now, there's times that, I'll get messages. It's the nature of being in IT. There's stuff happens all hours of the day. It's rare. It's not a common thing that I have to do, but every once in a while I'll get a message at 9:00 at night or something that some, shit is happening in the, some bush in Saskatchewan that needs to be sorted out. And so I gotta, but with this, I don't mind. It's a weird, like, I'm not thrilled about it, but I don't mind. I don't mind hopping on, and I don't mind kind of sorting this out because it kind of feels good to me. I sort of enjoy it. I enjoyed it enough that I don't really care. Whereas if, like when I was practicing acupuncture, if I had my schedule laid out for the day, and I had maybe the last 2 spots were open or something, and I was going to go home early that day, if somebody booked in to that last spot, like last minute, oh man, was I pissy about that? That was the worst. Like it was the worst possible thing that could have happened to me ever. Yeah. And I mean, that's within regular working hours. You should probably assume that you're going to work a full 8 hours, but no. If I didn't have, it would make me crazy when that happened. And so I think that alone is kind of shows that,
pretty telling.
I never, I don't know. It never was a great fit. It was just a matter of how long do you wait until you give into it. And,
like thinking then, if you were to imagine you're having a conversation with a practitioner, they're kind of like later on in their career, maybe they're graduated, they're 2 or 3 years in, and they're either were to say, hey man, I'm kind of not too sure if I want to be doing this, or you get to know them and you sense that. What would you say, like what are some signs that a person would look out for in themselves, in how they approach practice, that is like, this is a pretty telling that you should investigate, and maybe not doing what you did, right? Like you completely fundamentally shift your careers.
Well, I'm a very courageous person, so
you genuinely are. Like, man, like the amount of courage it takes to spend over a decade investing in something and then going like opposite direction, right? So maybe not doing that, but maybe like maybe acupuncture is not for you. Perhaps you could look at something else. What are some things that would come up?
I think, besides what we already talked about with whether or not you're living the lifestyle, I think that's the obvious one. I think a stagnant practice would be another pretty good indication that if you're doing the same thing over and over again, like literally with how you're treating your patients, that was what I did. Like I latched on to what I was good at and what I knew, and it's kind of all I wanted to do, and I wasn't looking to expand, in any way. And, and I think with any kind of medicine, really, I mean, it's a lifelong pursuit, whatever your modality is. And so I think if you're looking at your practice, if you have a stagnant, style and technique wise, and, a lot of stagnation there, then I think that would be, a pretty big one.
It's interesting as you say that, because I mean, I talk a lot about like what it means to practice. I find this idea of us calling ourselves practitioners in the practice of medicine, like that word, right? It's such an interesting thing.
The literal idea of practice.
The literal idea of practice, and it's built into what we identify as a practitioner, right? And it's kind of like you're saying, you stop practicing, like you stop putting the effort in.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's totally true. I never thought about it as in the literal idea of practice, but it really what it is what it is. You know, I mean, you like to think that you're a little past the stage of practicing when you're actually working on patients, but it is you're exploring, you know, different stuff all the time. You know, it can be little tiny things of just like how you palpate or something, or how you're exploring the body, or it can be giant concepts of how you approach a, you know, problem in general. But I think you should always be kind of thinking about that. You know, I like. Back to my dad analogy again, like that was why he was doing all that stuff, doing all of his own research and all that. Like he's simple joinery. There's, I mean, how many different ways are there to construct a joint? I mean, a million. And you know, you got to, and it's the same with if not more so with medicine. You have to, if you're not exploring all these avenues, and I guess that's what they're trying to get into with like continuing education credits and all that, is they're, you know, encouraging you for sure to explore. But you know, people don't. That was, I mean, for me, continuing education credits were phone those guys in. Yikes!
I think that's an important sign too. It's like because on one hand we're compelled, right? Like we have to get these continuing education credits.
Literally, yeah.
And it's like, do you view that as this really cool opportunity? Like something is driving you forward?
It's the right way to look at it.
Yeah. But if not, maybe that's another sign too.
Yeah. Well, I think it's there's, you know, a lot of different things that all come into are all a factor there with, you know, your how content you are with your professional life. But yeah, I know it for continuing ed stuff. It really, like it would always, like, I would talk to other people about it, you know, that I was working with and stuff, and people would they get super excited. They'd be traveling all over the place trying to, you know, they had really cool, you know, weekend courses that they wanted to go to, and who knows where, California or somewhere, and they can't wait. And you know, I'd be thinking like, this sounds like a nightmare. I don't want to do any of that. There's all this other stuff that I'd much rather do with my time and my money and my effort than you know, work. Yeah. And and
but
it just
jazzed about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and but it just doesn't. That just doesn't work. You just can't do it that way.
It's not sustainable. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it, you know, it depends what you're looking to get out of it. But for me, if you're looking to support a family and pay a mortgage and stuff, like, it just, good luck if you're going to really half-ass it, quarter-ass it.
And you kind of have to full-ass it in this business.
Full-ass everything.
You got to full-ass everything.
Full-ass life.
Yeah. Because if you're not like it's people aren't going to give you, I mean, some clinics will give you clients, but if you're half-assing it, that reflects too. Like, you're still going to give an okay treatment, but relative to the practitioner who walks into the room is like all in. And they're the one who is like thinking as much as I can, every little thing I could possibly do to make this session perfect, right? Yeah. Like, they're gonna, so then it's not sustainable in that regard as well.
Well, and I think the advantage of you know, when you're really, you know, pursuing whatever your form of medicine is with everything you have, you eventually start to develop your own style with all of this stuff, and I think that can alleviate some of the frustration that can come with a new practitioner, as well as, I think, when you're just getting out of school, you don't know what kind of, you know, acupuncturist you are, or what kind of massage therapist you are. You just regurgitating what you learned in school, and so I think what helps with that is developing your own style. And in order to develop your own style, you kind of have to do all that legwork that comes along with it, you know, because otherwise you don't know what the potential is. You know. So, you know, I think for me, I knew that I wanted to transition entirely out of medicine, but I don't think that that's totally necessary for a lot of people. Yeah. I would imagine the majority of people, if you're not happy with your current practice, I don't think you necessarily have to. I mean, you can, you know, you probably don't have to, you know, move entirely out of it. You can. Yeah, you know.
And that's more what I did.
For you, I think for you, you were a weird. kind of a weird guy in general, but
just
like
stop, end of conversation. Yeah.
But no, I think for you, it was like a different kind of, it always felt like with you in acupuncture, it was almost like it was too small for you. You know, I think you had too much going on. Like there's just acupuncture didn't fill up enough of your brain space. I think that it didn't offer enough. And so I think for you it was almost like acupuncture was too small for you. That you needed more.
And that was the solution. Is there were times where
it was
I'm
like the opposite of my problem. I couldn't. That was too much. For me, it was not enough for you. So
and there were times where I'm like, I tap out. I don't want to do this anymore. Like we've had that conversation in the past, right? Like how many times? But little by little, I realized like the different ways a person could go about that, because my practice was similar. It was stagnant, right? I was doing the exact same thing. I had zero desire to book any more clients. And like, if I did have all the exact same things you're describing, right? Like I've had those same experiences, but then a different route of doing it, knowing that like, I don't want to leave the medicine industry necessarily, but I really had to fundamentally shift how I practice in order to be able to sustain it. Yeah.
I think for you, it was almost like, you know, you went to school and you got your toolbox. You know, you got your little purse of tools that we come out of school with.
The tool purse.
The tool purse. You know, and so but you have your toolbox and you were using it effectively. But then it's like you were also kind of standing in like Home Depot, you know, with your little toolbox.
Yeah,
and like,
totally.
Man, it's like so many
tools.
Kind of just looking around at all the aisles of tools, and you're like, it seems kind of I maybe need a bigger toolbox.
Yeah.
And so that seems more for you. That's kind of what happened is you just made everything your toolbox. And I mean, it certainly made sense for you.
Yeah.
But I think, you ran into an issue more of like boredom and apathy, I think, and, you know, overly content with, because I mean, you're always good at it. We still are, obviously, but like so it's not like it was a lack of efficacy. It just wasn't enough.
Yeah.
You know, so now you got to build an empire.
Exactly. That's what I'm doing now. Yeah.
But no, opposite problems for sure. So.
And when you were sort of getting near the end, right? Like there was a point, obviously, in your career where you're like, okay, that's it. Like I got to get out. I have to switch something. What was that process like?
Stressful.
Yeah.
Stressful for sure. Yeah. I mean, again, like in my situation, you know, I was in my early 30s, I guess, early to mid 30s when decided like this is really time to jet. And, you know, by then I had a house, I had a wife, I had a kid. And so making such a major career shift and decision like that is tremendously stressful. And I think that kept me from doing it longer than I should have waited. But I think, you know, and I think a big moment for me was COVID, which COVID just obliterated our practice downtown. Being a clinic downtown, you know, I mean, we were shut down for a while, and then, you know, just nobody was working downtown. And I mean, who the hell wants to go downtown if you don't have to? And getting an acupuncture treatment is not motivation enough for most people to go downtown. And so it really, you know, that really sucked for the clinic. And so there's a lot of introspection there. There's a lot of, you know, searching about just from a financial kind of practical sense of like, we can barely pay our bills at this point. So something's got to give here. And so I think that was, I often think back and I think the worst thing that could have happened to me is being financially comfortable.
Right.
Because that probably, you know, I'd probably still be doing it. You know, right now is like, if I didn't struggle with that, I think that was that luckily for me in a weird way, in hindsight now, it was a good motivator. It just being so financially hit by COVID and everything around it, you know, that the practice was only just doing okay anyways, and then COVID just knocked it off the you know, platform there, and so I think that was big. That was a pretty big one for me was COVID. It really kind of forced my hand with all of that. And Yeah, and I mean, even then, it's a long process because I knew that I was passionate about tech. I still am passionate about tech. We talk about reading and doing your continuing education credits and stuff. Obviously, I don't have to do that with tech, but you kind of do, though. Like, I mean, you don't formally have to do it, but you kind of do.
If you're not doing it, you're in the dust 6 months from now.
No, it moves so quickly, but I do it. I go home and I watch tech videos on YouTube and I read about it and I get excited about it. All this stuff that we got with our new iPhones and all that kind of, man, I couldn't sleep for like days before I knew that I was getting a new phone and I was going to get a new watch and just new stuff to play with. And I was so excited about all that. Yeah. I was never that excited about anything to do with acupuncture. So it was, but the problem was, so you're interested in tech. What does that mean? We've had that conversation about a billion times. Is how do you translate that into some kind of a career? And that was a challenge for sure. Yeah. And it just kind of came down to patience. You just sort of have to be, constantly searching and just being patient with the process. Yeah, but
it's like a scary thing too, not only just leaving your career, but you were leaving for tech, and tech is notoriously young men's game, right? Like the people getting into it, they're fresh out of school and they've been doing tech their whole life, right? So, there's a couple things that would be very intimidating, I think, for a lot of people, not only switching careers fundamentally, going into something that you have to get a brand new education for and something that's totally different, but also being kind of, middle-aged, having a wife, having a kids, having a house, all those things kind of,
but yeah, no, you're totally right. Like it's terrifying in a lot of ways. But I think when you're passionate about something, that thing that you find terrifying, it kind of turns more into motivation than paralyzation in a way, or stagnation, God forbid. Chinese medicine, never take anything from it. Stagnation, awful. But I think, when you really are in, like I really enjoy it, and so for me, all of that stuff, it is scary, and I'm scared all the time. Is a constant state of terror now, but it's kind of motivating, and I've come to embrace it in a lot of ways, and it's never really going to end, I think that's any career worth pursuing is going to have that.
I was just thinking the same
element
thing
to it. That's just the way it should be. If you can master something even within just however many years we've been alive, it's too small. That pond is too shallow. And I guess it depends on the person. It wouldn't be satisfying for me though. You need those big things. And for me, the big thing was just something else.
I think that's pretty important, because having the constant desire to keep wanting to do things, one, but also having that almost fear type motivation, right? Yeah. And there's a nuance between it, because of course, I know you're a kid when it's like you're scared all the time, but it's like there's that little bit of something saying, I need to keep improving in order to be the best I can at this for a bunch of reasons, right? And that's so important to do in all aspects. I mean, it's important in the wellness industry too. Like that motivation, I think, is one of the things. Yeah, it makes you a good practitioner.
Hugely. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, wellness or just medicine and health in general. It's if you're not a little scared of it or a lot of scared of it, then you're not giving it the respect that it deserves, really. That's probably a sign that maybe you're not into it. Yeah. Because for me, with acupuncture, I was a fairly competent practitioner. I was pretty good at what I did, but, there was obviously an endless amount of expansion and knowledge that I could have, learned. And you just, if it's not, if you're not into it, then that terror element, it ends up turning into more, not just apathy about the whole thing. You just kind of just don't. It becomes so much that you just kind of decide. You just kind of. I can never. It's too much money. It's too much time. It's too much. There's no point in pursuing any of it really. I mean, why bother? What I'm doing now is working. Yeah. I have happy patients. I had a lot of success with how I did things. And so I just keep doing that. Yeah. I don't know. Like for most of the career, the bills were being paid and it was, all good. So I think that's that when you're not passionate about something, that's what ends up, I think, happening with that terror motivation is it just turns into apathy. Yeah. It's funny. Like I do think you shouldn't identify with what you do for a living, but it does have a tremendous impact.
It does. There's a line in there, right? Like there's a certain amount of identification that I think it's going to come no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. Like no matter what, you're going to identify to some degree of what you do. But it is different for everybody too. But then I think when you do identify it, even if it's only the smallest little bit, and you identify with what you do, how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel like, I'm okay with this, or does it make you feel like this sucks? Yeah.
Well, yeah. Are you proud about telling people what you do? Or I mean, I was always kind of embarrassed, honestly, to talk about being an acupuncturist. You know, people when they seek an acupuncturist, like for me, my style ended up becoming more almost like a physiotherapist than it was an acupuncturist. But you know, that's not why people go to an acupuncturist. Right. Most people, at least. You know, most people are looking for that more kind of esoteric kind of alternative approach, as they should. That's what most acupuncturists offer. You get pretty good at kind of dodging that kind of stuff when you just, I mean, I hardly knew anything about it, but I was pretty good at referring people off to, you know, if you're going to come in talking about all that kind of stuff, then this is not going to work. If you don't want dry needling, then I'm not your guy. Yeah. You want something else.
If you don't want like sort of physio stuff, but not quite.
Go
somewhere else.
Yeah. And unfortunately, being a pseudo physiotherapist does not. It doesn't really work. No. People would rather just go to a physiotherapist. Weirdly enough. So, you know,
we've been chatting for nearly an hour, and I figure this is probably a good time to just kind of summarize and kind of wrap up. The question I'd like to ask you at the end of all this is like, let's say somebody has identified the fact, like, okay, I this isn't for me. Like I put in my time, I gave it a real try. For whatever reason, I thought I was into it, but my passion, my desire, my heart isn't into it. What do you got to say to a person like that who's ready for a career change, to shift completely out of medicine? This isn't the person who's
completely out.
Yeah, this isn't the person who's like shifting the style of wellness they practice. This is a person who's decided, I'm going into a different industry altogether.
Yikes. Yeah, yikes. No, I mean, I would say don't wait. I think would be my main because it's very easy to be a little complacent with the whole thing, and you know, you pay your bills, and then before you know it, it's 2 years later, and you've spent those 2 years thinking about changing and going off and doing something else, but you haven't done anything about it. And so I'd say just don't wait, and explore everything. Like, I mean, I think everybody has a general idea of kind of what they're interested in, I would hope. So that's, I think that's the dilemma there. Is you have to figure out, you know, I don't think don't worry about your, I mean, passion a little bit, but like just what you're interested in. Like when you go home after a day of acupuncture that you kind of hated, what do you pop on YouTube when you get home, and what are you watching? You know, what are you reading about when you're on, I don't know, Reddit or Twitter or whatever, and you're looking like, what kind of people are you following and stuff, and like what podcasts you're listening to? Like this is all, it's all shaping what your interest is in. And so now you figure out what you're interested in, and now you have to figure out how you turn that into a paycheck. And I think you have to get comfortable with the idea of just starting at the bottom. I think it's we don't like that idea, because I think when you come out of school, you're sort of sold this concept of, now you're an accomplished person, you're an educated person, you've got paperwork on the wall. The days of being on the bottom are done for you. You're a medicine person, and see, I think you have to kind of. You kind of have to eat it a little bit, you know, and you have to just get over it, and you have to start at the bottom, and you know, whatever your field is in, you know, it doesn't matter. There's always a bottom, and you have to figure out what that bottom is, and don't get too stressed about whether that particular bottom position, whether or not that specific position is encompassing what your vision is of, where you're going.
Foot in the door kind of thing.
Yeah, it's totally like you just have to get into something, and then you kind of let life take its organic path. Because I think when you're doing something that you're interested in, that organic nature of life, it works for you. And things start to, I've already found that just in the position that I'm in now, where I'm in the bottom position of IT, but it's already developing, and it's starting to mature into, like, I can kind of see where my next steps are going to be, and I'm starting to sort of see where I want to go with this. And now, I'm doing more kind of specific courses on my own time to kind of, okay, well, now I kind of have a better picture of what this industry looks like. Now I can kind of start steering myself into a more specific direction. So I think you have to be comfortable with starting at the bottom of whatever industry you're going to be moving into, and you have to just start doing it, and let that grow on its own, which it will. So you can't get too stressed about that specific, that first step that you're going to be taking.
You got to do it.
You just I don't know. There's some saying about eating an elephant in one bite at a time.
Something about that nonsense.
But yeah, I think that would be my kind of advice is don't wait. Do it. I think hey, come on. Like, I don't know. Like, if you're really on the fence about it, then maybe you don't have to leave medicine entirely.
Yeah.
I'm specifically talking about medicine now, but and that's fine. That's probably easier if you can just transition into some other form of medicine. Oh, not that easy anyways, though. Like, we had that discussion a lot. And it's not that easy.
But not that easy.
But probably a little bit easier. But yeah, don't wait, because deep down, and figure out what you're interested in. Also, you probably know that.
Yeah.
And I think whatever you're interested in, there's going to be a way. If you're a travel blogger, you don't think like, okay, I'm going to be a travel blogger. You're interested in travel, or you're interested in writing maybe, or whatever it is that you find more in. So now you take that, and now how do people make money in the travel industry, or how do people make money writing, and you maybe become like an editor or something. Like, who knows? There's always, you can pick that apart, and you can turn it into something that can pay the bills. Yeah. And so don't wait. Figure out what you're interested in. Go for that bottom first step, and let it flourish.
Nice.
And that's all you got to do. Simple, right? It's simple. Simple. Yeah. Just do it. Just Nike it. Just do
Nike it. I think that's a great place to wrap her up.
Yeah.
Unless you got anything else you want to talk about?
No, I don't know. Yeah. I'm surprised I had so much to talk about anyways. So.
All right. Well, thanks for chatting.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Right?
All right then.
Bunch of dribbling nonsense, but what can you do?